The air crackled with tension. A palpable fear hung over the region, heavy and suffocating. For days, the drums of war had been beating, growing louder, more insistent. Israel, a nation forged in conflict, braced itself for another confrontation. Across the border, Hezbollah, the militant group that has been a thorn in Israel's side for decades, prepared to make its move. The world watched, holding its breath, as the Middle East teetered on the precipice of another devastating conflict. The trigger for this latest eruption of violence was a series of rocket attacks launched from Lebanon into Israeli territory. Israel blamed Hezbollah for the attacks, accusing the group of using Lebanon as a base from which to attack the Jewish state. Hezbollah, for its part, remained defiant, vowing to respond to any Israeli aggression. The stage was set for a dangerous escalation. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the land, the Israeli military went on high alert. Intelligence reports suggested that Hezbollah was planning a major attack, perhaps even an incursion into Israeli territory. The Israeli government authorized a series of preemptive airstrikes against suspected Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. The die was cast. The night sky over southern Lebanon erupted in a terrifying display of fire and fury. Israeli warplanes, armed with sophisticated weaponry, roared over the border, their engines screaming defiance. Targets were acquired and destroyed with ruthless efficiency. Hezbollah command and control centers, weapons depots and training camps were reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes. The roar of explosions echoed across the hills, shaking the ground like an earthquake.
But Hezbollah was ready. As soon as the first Israeli bombs began to fall, the group responded with a barrage of rockets fired into northern Israel. Sirens wailed, sending terrified residents scrambling for shelter. The rockets, while less sophisticated than Israel's arsenal, were still deadly, capable of inflicting significant damage and casualties.
For hours, the two sides traded blows, the night sky illuminated by the flashes of explosions and the trails of rockets. As dawn broke, the full extent of the devastation became clear. In Lebanon, entire villages lay in ruins, the homes of innocent civilians reduced to piles of rubble. The death toll mounted with each passing hour, the majority of the victims civilians caught in the crossfire. In Israel, too, there was damage and loss of life, though on a smaller scale. The specter of a wider war, a conflict that could engulf the entire region, loomed large. The international community watched with growing alarm as the situation in the Middle East spiraled out of control. The United Nations, the European Union, and world leaders all issued urgent calls for restraint, urging both sides to step back from the brink, but their pleas seemed to fall on deaf ears.
Israel, determined to crush Hezbollah once and for all, vowed to continue its military campaign until the threat was eliminated. Hezbollah, for its part, was equally determined to resist what it saw as Israeli aggression. The conflict threatened to draw in other regional powers, turning a localized conflict into a wider conflagration. Iran, Hezbollah's main backer, condemned the Israeli strikes and pledged its unwavering support to the group. Saudi Arabia, Israel's tacit ally, threw its weight behind the Jewish state, accusing Iran of destabilizing the region.
The United States, caught in the middle, found itself in the unenviable position of trying to mediate between two allies on the verge of all-out war. As the days turned into nights and the nights into days, the violence continued unabated. Each side seemed determined to inflict as much pain and suffering on the other as possible. Hopes for a quick resolution to the conflict faded with each passing hour. The world held its breath, praying for a miracle that would prevent the situation from spiraling completely out of control.
The international community, desperate to avert a humanitarian catastrophe, redoubled its efforts to broker a ceasefire. Diplomats shuttled back and forth between Beirut, Jerusalem, and other regional capitals, desperately seeking a way to bridge the divide between the warring parties.
The United Nations Security Council held emergency meetings, but their efforts to pass a resolution condemning the violence were repeatedly blocked by vetoes from the United States and Russia. Aid agencies struggled to get supplies to those in desperate need. Hospitals in southern Lebanon, overwhelmed by the influx of casualties, ran out of essential medicines and supplies.
The International Committee of the Red Cross issued an urgent appeal for access to the conflict zone, warning that the humanitarian situation was deteriorating rapidly.
But amidst the chaos and despair, there were also glimmers of hope. Religious leaders from all faiths joined together to call for peace, reminding their followers that violence was never the answer. Ordinary citizens on both sides of the conflict organized protests demanding an end to the bloodshed.
And even as bombs continued to fall and rockets continued to fly, there were those who dared to dream of a different future. A future where peace would prevail over hatred.
Amidst the escalating conflict, the words of leaders reverberated across the world, carrying the weight of their positions and the potential to sway public opinion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a seasoned politician known for his hawkish stance, delivered a televised address to the nation.
His face, etched with concern and determination, filled the screens as he vowed to protect Israeli citizens at all costs. He accused Hezbollah of being a terrorist organization, a proxy of Iran, and declared that Israel would not tolerate any threats to its security.
Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a charismatic figure revered by his followers, responded with a fiery speech of his own. Speaking from a secret location, his words echoing through loudspeakers across Lebanon, he accused Israel of waging an unprovoked war against the Lebanese people. He vowed that Hezbollah would continue to fight until every last Israeli soldier was driven from Lebanese soil.
These pronouncements, delivered with conviction and passion, resonated deeply with their respective audiences. In Israel, Netanyahu's words fueled a sense of unity and resolve. In Lebanon, Nasrallah's speech ignited a spirit of resistance and defiance.
The world listened intently, analyzing every word, every inflection for any sign of a potential breakthrough. But for now, the rhetoric only served to deepen the divide, pushing the two sides further apart. So, as the conflict entered its second week, the situation remained volatile and unpredictable. The international community's efforts to broker a ceasefire had yet to bear fruit. Both sides seemed entrenched in their positions, unwilling to back down. The specter of a wider conflict, one that could engulf the entire region, loomed large over the horizon. The human cost of the conflict continued to mount. Thousands of people had been killed, and many more were injured. The fighting had displaced hundreds of thousands of people, forcing them to flee their homes and seek refuge in overcrowded shelters. The economies of both Israel and Lebanon had been severely impacted, with businesses forced to close and tourism coming to a standstill. The future remained uncertain. Would the two sides find a way to end the violence and return to the negotiating table? Or would the conflict continue to escalate, dragging the region into a deeper abyss of violence and despair? The world watched and waited, hoping against hope for a peaceful resolution. But for now, the only certainty was that the people of Israel and Lebanon would continue to pay the price for a conflict not of their making.